The morning sun rose gently over the town of Arochukwu, casting a golden glow on rooftops, palm trees, and the narrow roads already alive with celebration. Music echoed from the compound of the Okorie family. Drums, laughter, ululation, and the excited chatter of women preparing for what was meant to be the happiest day of their daughter's life. Nkiru Okorie sat quietly in her childhood room, dressed in white, while her bridesmaids moved around her in a frenzy. Her makeup was flawless, her hair beautifully styled, her wedding gown perfectly fitted. Anyone looking at her would think she was the picture of joy. But inside, something felt wrong. Her heart beat too fast, her chest felt tight. She smiled when spoken to, laughed when expected, but the joy never reached her eyes. "Nkiru, today you finally become a wife," her aunt exclaimed, clapping her hands. Her mother, Mama Okorie, wiped away tears of pride. "God has done it. After all these years, my daughter is getting married into a good family." Everyone believed it. After all, Kunle Adeyemi was the ideal groom. Handsome, successful, respected. He worked in Lagos, owned property, drove a good car, and spoke confidently. The kind of man families prayed their daughters would marry. What no one saw was how Nkiru's hands trembled slightly as she held her bouquet. She remembered how the relationship began. Sweet messages, long calls, promises of forever. Kunle had been charming, attentive, and persuasive. When doubts crept in, he dismissed them with confidence. "You worry too much," he'd say. "Trust me." And she had, over and over again. Outside, the wedding guests arrived in elegant attire. Food vendors prepared large pots of jollof rice and pepper soup. Photographers adjusted their cameras. The church bells rang in anticipation. Everything was perfect. Yet deep inside, Nkiru felt like she was walking towards something she didn't fully understand. She whispered a silent prayer. "God, if there is something I need to know, please reveal it today." She didn't know how quickly that prayer would be answered. By mid-morning, the compound was overflowing. Relatives from far and near had arrived. Friends from school, work colleagues, church members, all gathered to witness the union. Nkiru was ushered into a quiet room at the church to prepare for the ceremony. As her bridesmaids stepped out briefly to handle arrangements, she remained seated alone, adjusting her veil. That was when she heard voices. They were faint at first, drifting in from the corridor near the vestry. She didn't intend to listen, but her name caught her attention. "She still doesn't know?" a woman whispered. "No," another voice replied. "Kunle said it would ruin everything if she found out now." Nkiru's heart skipped. Find out what? She stood slowly and moved closer to the door, her breath shallow. "I can't believe he's marrying her without telling her about the other woman," the first voice said. "There's more," the second voice replied nervously. "It's not just another woman, there's a child." The world around Nkiru seemed to tilt. "A child?" the first voice gasped. "And she's pregnant again?" "Yes. Kunle promised he would handle it. He said marriage would calm things down." Nkiru felt her knees weaken. She grabbed the edge of a table to steady herself. A child, another woman, lies. Her mind raced through memories. Kunle's sudden disappearances, his irritation when she asked questions, the phone calls he always took outside. The voices faded as the women walked away, unaware that a life had just shattered behind them. Nkiru returned to her seat slowly, her hands cold, her body numb. "Is this true?" she asked herself desperately. "Could he really do this?" Her phone buzzed. A message from Kunle. "Everything is ready. I can't wait to see you walk down the aisle." Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't cry. Instead, something else rose within her. Clarity. For the first time, she understood why peace had eluded her all morning. The wedding music outside grew louder. The moment of truth was approaching, and Nkiru knew her life was about to change forever. Nkiru sat alone in the small room behind the church altar. Her wedding gown spreading around her like a pool of white, she suddenly felt unworthy to wear. Her heart pounded so loudly, she wondered if the walls could hear it. The whispers she had overheard replayed in her mind again and again, each time cutting deeper than the last. A child, another woman. He didn't tell her. She pressed her palm against her chest, trying to slow her breathing. For a moment, she hoped it was all a misunderstanding, careless gossip, exaggerated rumors. But deep down, a quiet voice told her otherwise. Too many things now made sense. Kunle's unexplained absences, his phone always on silent, the way he avoided certain questions, the rushed wedding date. Nkiru stood up slowly. Her legs felt weak, but her resolve was forming. She needed the truth. From Kunle himself. Outside the room, the church buzzed with activity. The choir rehearsed softly. Guests settled into their seats. The wedding coordinator hurried past, clipboard in hand, smiling nervously. Nkiru stepped into the corridor just as Kunle appeared at the other end, dressed in his tailored suit, looking confident and relaxed. When he saw her, his face lit up. "There you are," he said warmly, walking toward her. "Everyone is waiting. You look beautiful." She searched his face for signs of guilt, for hesitation, for anything that might reassure her that what she heard wasn't true. She found nothing. "Kunle," she said quietly, "we need to talk. Now." He hesitated briefly, surprised by her tone, but nodded. "Okay, what's wrong?" They stepped into a side room, away from the noise. As soon as the door closed, the silence between them grew heavy. Nkiru didn't waste time. "Do you have a child?" she asked, her voice steady but trembling beneath the surface. Kunle froze. For a split second, his confident expression cracked. Just enough. "What kind of question is that?" he replied quickly, forcing a laugh. "Why would you—" "Do you have a child?" she repeated, her eyes locked on his. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. Kunle exhaled sharply and rubbed his forehead. "We are about to get married." "So that's a yes," she said softly. He looked away. Her chest tightened. "And the child's mother?" she continued. "Is she pregnant again?" Silence. That silence was louder than any confession. Tears finally spilled from Nkiru's eyes. Not loud, not dramatic, but steady, painful tears of betrayal. "How long?" she whispered. Kunle sighed, clearly irritated now. "It happened before we got serious. It wasn't planned. I didn't think it mattered anymore." "Didn't matter?" she repeated, stunned. "You have a child, another woman, and you didn't think it mattered?" "I was going to tell you later," he said defensively. "After the wedding, I didn't want to ruin everything." Her heart shattered completely in that moment. "You didn't want to ruin what?" she asked. "The wedding or the lie?" Kunle stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Listen to me. This doesn't change how I feel about you. We can handle this privately. The child doesn't have to affect our marriage." Nkiru stared at him, disbelief washing over her. "You decided my future for me," she said. "You took away my right to choose." Kunle's patience snapped. "You're overreacting. Do you know how embarrassing it would be to cancel this wedding now? Our families are here. Money has been spent." "So that's all this is to you?" she asked. "Image? Pride?" He looked frustrated. "You're being selfish." That word hit her harder than any slap. Selfish, for refusing to marry a man who had built their relationship on lies. She stepped back, her hands shaking, but her voice grew stronger. "I cannot marry you," she said. Kunle laughed nervously. "You're joking." "I am not." "You'll regret this," he warned. "Women like you don't get many chances." Nkiru wiped her tears and lifted her chin. "I would rather walk away alone than enter a marriage built on deception." At that moment, the wedding coordinator knocked urgently on the door. "It's time," she said brightly, unaware of the storm inside. Nkiru took one last look at Kunle, a man she thought she knew. Then she turned away. Outside, the wedding music swelled. The doors to the church stood ready to open. But Nkiru had already made her decision. The wedding march began softly outside the room, the familiar melody floating through the church like a promise already broken. Guests stood in anticipation, smiles stretched across their faces, unaware that the bride behind the closed doors was fighting the greatest battle of her life. Nkiru leaned against the wall, her breathing uneven. Her wedding gown suddenly felt heavy, suffocating. Just minutes ago, she had imagined herself walking down the aisle, surrounded by love and celebration. Now every note of the music felt like a countdown to a mistake she could never undo. Her mother knocked gently on the door. "My daughter," Mama Okori said softly, stepping inside. "It is time." Nkiru turned toward her, tears filling her eyes. The sight of her mother, radiant in traditional attire, glowing with pride, nearly broke her resolve. "Mama," her voice cracked, "I need to tell you something." Mama Okori frowned, sensing the tremor beneath her daughter's words. "What is it? Are you nervous? It's normal." Nkiru shook her head slowly. "Kunle has a child, and another woman. He has been lying to me." The words hung in the air like smoke. Mama Okori stared at her daughter in disbelief. "What did you say?" Before Nkiru could continue, her aunt entered the room, followed closely by her father. The tension on Nkiru's face had drawn them in. "What is going on?" her father asked firmly. Nkiru repeated herself, her voice steadier now, though her heart ached with every word. Her mother sank into a chair, clutching her chest. "God forbid," she whispered. Her father's face hardened. "Are you sure?" "Yes," Nkiru replied. He admitted it. Outside, the wedding coordinator hurried back and forth, unaware that the ceremony had come to a standstill. Mama Okorie wiped her tears quickly and stood up. "We cannot disgrace ourselves," she said firmly. "People are waiting. We can deal with this later." Nkiru stared at her mother in shock. "Later? Mama, this is my life." Her aunt stepped forward. "All men have issues," she said quietly. "Marriage is about endurance." Her father avoided her eyes. "You have come too far to turn back now." The weight of expectation pressed down on Nkiru from every direction. She looked around the room, at the faces of the people who loved her, who had sacrificed for this day, and felt herself breaking under the pressure. Part of her wanted to obey, to walk down the aisle, to silence her doubts and hope for the best. But another voice inside her whispered fiercely, "If you accept this now, you will lose yourself forever." Nkiru closed her eyes and remembered all the moments she had ignored her instincts, all the times she had chosen peace over truth. Her mother's voice softened. "My daughter, marriage is not perfect. You will manage." Nkiru took a deep breath. "Mama," she said gently, "if I marry him today, knowing what I know, I will be teaching myself that my dignity does not matter." Tears streamed down her mother's face. Her father sighed heavily, torn between tradition and truth. Outside, the church fell into uneasy silence as minutes passed without the bride. Finally, Nkiru straightened her back. "I love you all," she said, her voice calm despite the storm in her heart. "But I cannot do this." Her aunt gasped. "Do you know what people will say?" "Yes," Nkiru replied, "and I am ready to face it." The wedding coordinator knocked again, panic creeping into her voice. "We need to start now." Nkiru reached for the door handle, her hands no longer shaking. She was no longer torn. She had chosen herself. The church doors swung open slowly, and the guests turned expectantly toward the aisle. The choir's voices rose in harmony, the drums and the gentle hum of the organ creating a rhythm of celebration. Everyone thought the bride was ready. Everyone thought this would be a perfect day. But Nkiru did not appear. Kunle adjusted his cufflinks nervously at the altar, smiling stiffly. "Where is she?" he whispered to his best man, a flicker of unease in his eyes. "Maybe she's nervous," the best man replied, shrugging. A hush fell over the guests as whispers began to ripple through the hall. Mothers clutched their sons' hands. Aunties whispered fervently to each other. The bride's absence was now glaring. Outside, Nkiru stood in the corridor, her wedding gown brushing the polished floor, her veil falling softly over her shoulders. The music echoed behind her, joyful, expectant, but it no longer belonged to her. The notes felt like chains, reminding her of the lies she had just uncovered, the betrayal she could never ignore. Her heart thudded, not with fear, but with a clarity she had never felt before. It was time. She took a deep breath, lifted her head high, and walked toward the doors. Each step was deliberate. Each step echoed the courage she had been summoning for months. The courage to honor her dignity, to refuse a life built on lies. The first gasp came from the guests as they saw her silhouette against the bright light streaming through the church doors. Cameras clicked. Phones were lifted. Mothers whispered, "She's walking alone?" Kunle's eyes widened, disbelief flashing across his face. "Nkiru," he called, but she did not stop. She continued down the aisle, not to him, but past him. Not a step toward the altar, but a step toward freedom. He ran after her, his voice rising, panic dripping from every syllable. "Stop! Wait! This is ridiculous! Think of your family, your reputation!" She did not turn. Tears blurred the faces of the guests, some of admiration, some of shock, some of disbelief. A few young women whispered to each other, "She's brave." Older women shook their heads, muttering about lost dignity. But Nkiru walked on. Her mother's sobs echoed softly behind her, but Nkiru barely noticed. Her father's expression was unreadable, a mix of anger, confusion, and concern. The wedding coordinator rushed toward her, hand outstretched. "Please, we can fix this." "Fix this?" Nkiru said, her voice strong. "The only thing that needs fixing is the truth, and I will not compromise my life, my values, or my dignity for anyone." Kunle reached for her hand, but she pulled back. The crowd watched, stunned, as she stepped out of the church entirely, leaving the groom, the altar, and the expectations of everyone behind. The sunlight outside felt warm, free, and real. She took a deep breath, feeling for the first time in hours, maybe in years, that she was living her own life. She could hear Kunle's voice shouting behind the church doors, threats mingled with pleading. "You'll regret this. You'll never find another like me." She smiled faintly, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I'll regret nothing," she whispered. The moment of courage had passed, and she was free. Free not just from the marriage, but from the fear, the lies, and the compromise she had almost accepted. The aisle behind her became a memory, a reminder that courage often comes in the quietest, most solitary steps. For the first time, Nkiru realized that love for oneself was stronger than the love she had imagined for someone else. Walking away was not humiliation, it was triumph. The sun shone brightly over Arachuku that day, but it could not warm the cold reality of Nkiru's choice. Word of her dramatic exit from the wedding had already spread across the compound and beyond. Guests whispered in small clusters, shaking their heads. Phones were out, videos were being recorded, and the news of a bride walking away from her wedding was no longer just an event. It was the talk of the town. Inside the church, Kunle stood frozen, his perfectly tailored suit feeling heavy and constricting. His face, once full of confidence, now revealed pure shock and rage. "How dare she," he thought. "How could she humiliate me in front of everyone?" His best man tried to calm him. "Kunle, we can sort this out later." "No," Kunle snapped. "You don't understand. This is my reputation, my family, everything." Meanwhile, Nkiru had stepped into the small garden outside the church. The music continued faintly in the background, but to her, it sounded like an insult. Her veil fluttered in the wind as she tried to breathe. The weight of every eye in the community that now knew what she had done pressed down on her. Shame was supposed to crush her. After all, in their culture, a woman walking away from her wedding day invited endless gossip, judgment, and often long-term scrutiny. Mothers muttered warnings, fathers shook their heads, and even strangers in the street whispered as she passed. Yet, despite all of that, Nkiru felt a strange calm inside. "This is my life," she reminded herself, "not anyone else's." Her mother appeared beside her, tears running freely down her cheeks. "Nkiru, my daughter, people will not understand. You have shamed the family." Nkiru took her mother's hand gently. "Mama, I have not shamed anyone. I have only chosen truth over lies. I cannot build my life on deception. That is not shame, it is strength." Her mother's hands trembled as she looked at her daughter. For a moment, pride and fear collided in her eyes. "I always knew you were different," she said softly. "I only hope people will see what you see in yourself." The guests began to trickle outside, curious, some judging, others whispering admiration. A few younger women approached Nkiru cautiously. "Girl, that took courage," one whispered. "I could never do that." Nkiru offered a small smile. It's not easy, but it had to be done. Even Kunle eventually followed her outside, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. Do you know what you've done? He demanded. Everyone is talking. This is humiliation. She looked him straight in the eye, steady and resolute. No, Kunle. This is liberation, and if you call truth humiliation, I would rather live humiliated by society than married to a man who deceives me. Kunle's jaw tightened, and for a moment he seemed to realize that no amount of threats, pleading, or rage could move her. Nkiru's dignity was unshakable. After he left, muttering angrily, she finally allowed herself a deep, shuddering breath. The weight of the day pressed on her shoulders, but it was no longer fear, it was relief. For hours, she sat quietly under a mango tree in the church compound, reflecting on her life. She thought about the years she had devoted to trust, to patience, and to love. She realized that courage was not just walking away. Courage was facing the judgment of her family, friends, and community, knowing they might never understand. And yet, for the first time, Nkiru felt free. Free from lies, free from compromise, free from a path that was never hers to begin with. By sunset, her mother joined her again, this time calmer. People may gossip, Mama Okori said, but I see the woman my daughter has become. Strong, brave, honest. I am proud of you. Nkiru smiled, feeling a quiet warmth spread through her chest. Private strength, she realized, was far more powerful than public approval, and she had it in abundance. As night fell over the village, Nkiru returned home, alone, yes, but with a sense of empowerment that she had never known. She was determined to rebuild her life on her own terms, and in that determination lay the first true joy she had felt in months. The days after the wedding debacle were not easy. Nkiru returned to her family home to a mixture of support, curiosity, and judgment. Villagers whispered in the streets, friends called, some offering comfort, others unable to hide their disbelief. Yet, amid the chaos, a quiet determination began to take root within her. At first it was simply small acts. She began walking through the market alone, holding her head high, even when women murmured, she left Kunle on her wedding day? She answered only with polite nods, refusing to let their judgment diminish her sense of self. Her mother, Mama Okori, watched closely. Nkiru, you must find a way to move forward. You cannot live in yesterday's pain forever. I know, Mama, Nkiru said softly, but moving forward means I must first face myself. I need to be independent, emotionally and financially. I cannot depend on a marriage that would compromise me. Determined, Nkiru returned to her teaching job at the local secondary school, a position she had always valued but previously treated as secondary to her pursuit of marriage. She threw herself into her work with renewed purpose. Her students noticed the change immediately. There was a fire in her eyes, a confidence in her posture, a quiet authority that demanded respect. Outside of work, Nkiru began volunteering at the local women's empowerment group, teaching young girls about self-worth and independence. She spoke openly about choices, courage, and the importance of protecting one's dignity, even when the world demanded conformity. One day, while speaking to a group of teenage girls, she said, "It is better to walk away from something that will destroy your spirit than to stay and lose yourself. Do not fear judgment. Fear only living a life that is not yours." Her words resonated. Several girls approached her afterward, thanking her for being honest, for showing them that strength and self-respect mattered more than approval or appearances. In her personal life, Nkiru rebuilt her routine with care. She invested in herself, saving money, enrolling in a short business course, and reconnecting with old friends she had lost touch with. Slowly, she began to see possibilities that had seemed impossible when she was focused solely on marriage. Her family, initially torn between worry and embarrassment, began to understand. Even her father, who had struggled to reconcile tradition with his daughter's decision, expressed pride one evening. "Nkiru," he said quietly, "you have done what few would dare. You have chosen yourself, and in doing so, You have shown us all what it means to be brave." By the end of the year, Nkiru had taken steps toward financial independence, opening a small tutoring center for local children. She transformed pain into purpose. The gossip faded slowly, replaced by admiration in some quarters, respect in others. She learned that not everyone would understand, but that was no longer her concern. Most importantly, Nkiru began to forgive, not Kunle, who had deceived her, but herself. She forgave herself for trusting, for dreaming, for hoping. She understood that love was not a weakness, but discernment was strength. In the quiet of her own home one evening, as the sun set behind the red-tiled rooftops of Arakuku, Nkiru realized something remarkable. She felt whole for the first time in years. The pain of betrayal still lingered, yes, but it no longer defined her. She had rebuilt herself, stronger and wiser, and nothing, not tradition, not gossip, not deceit, could take that away. Her courage had planted a seed, one that would grow into a life fully her own. And in that life she found freedom, peace, and a quiet joy that no marriage could have guaranteed. The months following the wedding incident were a test of Nkiru's strength, patience, and vision for herself. Life in Arakuku slowly returned to its normal rhythm, but Nkiru's world had changed forever. She no longer feared judgment, nor did she allow the past to define her future. She continued to grow her tutoring center, which became a local success. Children flocked to her classes, not only to learn mathematics, English, or history, but also to witness the confidence and dignity of a woman who refused to compromise her values. Parents, once skeptical, began recommending her to their neighbors. In time, Nkiru became known as more than a teacher. She became a symbol of courage in the community. One afternoon, as she sat in her office reviewing lesson plans, a young girl burst in, beaming. "Miss Nkiru, my father says I can finally go to secondary school because of your tutoring." Nkiru smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "That's wonderful, Chiamaka. I'm so happy for you." It was moments like these that reminded her she had made the right choice. Walking away from Kunle hadn't been easy. The whispers, the stares, the disapproval, these had all been painful. But now, the impact of her courage was visible in the lives she touched, the respect she earned, and the freedom she felt every morning when she woke up in a home that was entirely her own. Even her family healed over time. Mama Okori, who had initially feared social disgrace, came to understand the strength in her daughter's decision. One evening, as they shared a simple meal, her mother said quietly, "Nkiru, your father and I have seen something remarkable. You chose truth over appearances, and that is bravery. You've taught us all something." Her father nodded. "We may not have understood at first, but now we see it clearly. You are free, and you have made yourself the architect of your life. That is more important than any wedding or ceremony." Nkiru felt a sense of peace she had never known. She had walked away from societal expectations, from lies, from a relationship that would have consumed her dignity. And in that walking away, she had found herself. Time passed, and Nkiru's story became a quiet legend in Orochukwu. Young women who faced pressure to marry men they did not trust would hear her story. "Remember Nkiru," mothers would say. "She taught us that courage and truth matter more than fear or appearances." Nkiru herself never sought fame or attention. She did not speak of Kunle publicly, nor did she entertain offers of romantic relationships immediately. Instead, she focused on building a life filled with purpose, independence, and meaningful connections. Her life became proof that walking away from what diminishes you can lead to freedom, happiness, and empowerment. One evening, as the sun set over the red-tiled rooftops and the mango trees rustled gently in the evening breeze, Nkiru sat on her veranda, reflecting. She thought about how easy it would have been to compromise, to succumb to pressure, to marry Kunle and live a life of quiet despair. But she hadn't. She had chosen truth. She had chosen dignity. She had chosen herself. And in choosing herself, she had discovered a freedom more precious than any wedding, more valuable than any title, more enduring than any societal expectation. Nkiru smiled softly, letting the warm wind brush her face. Life, she realized, had opened a new chapter, not one dictated by fear, lies, or others' expectations, but one she would write herself, full of courage, wisdom, and endless possibilities. She had walked away, and in walking away, she had finally arrived.